Welcome again to another episode. And I don't know where you're listening to us today from. However, the weather in London has been absolutely gorgeous. So I hope that wherever you are, you're enjoying the beginning of what feels like summer. Anyway, let's just dive right into our conversation today. Somewhere along the way, someone handed you a lie about yourself. Now, themselves might not necessarily have known that it was a lie. They may have believed it completely. And sometimes it could have been a parent, maybe a teacher, maybe a community leader, or even a classmate. But they had very clear ideas about what a woman like you could and could not be. And somewhere in between you hearing it and where you are now stopped you from questioning it. In other words, you stopped questioning, is this really true? Am I really not able to be XYZ? And I've worked with enough, leaders to know that when a lie has been handed over to you, you just start leading, through those. Last week, we talked about the battle for your mind. And so today we're going to get really specific, and I want us to take some time and really name these lies. We want to examine them, and we want to be able to then replace them with something that is actually true. Because the truth of God, when you actually meet it, when you actually find it, it does something that that lie never could, and it really does set you free. And I believe that each of us, we're meant to be living in that freedom that God has already given us, right? So each time or any leader where there has been lies planted, like planted thoughts or planted lies somewhere along the way, they limit themselves. And a leadership lie is any belief about yourself that really limits what you will attempt or will constrain how you would actually lead yourself and maybe lead your organization or lead your teams. It causes you to consistently perform well below your actual capacity and capability. And the most dangerous ones of these lies, they don't even sound like lies. Can you believe it? They really do sound like realism. And sometimes it can sound as simple as, I don't actually think I'm ready yet. And you might actually be saying that for the fifth consecutive year. Or maybe people don't usually, get to that level. Well, people don't really get me, right? These are not signs of self-awareness. And I do believe that every leader has to develop that, awareness, self-awareness. It's going to be your biggest and greatest asset. However, these are lies, and they have the sound of a leader who has simply accepted, a ceiling that really was never meant to be there. Now, there's a story I once read, and about an elephant and the rope. And if you've ever been to circus anywhere across the world, well, sometimes they do have grown elephants for a long time. Most circuses actually did have elephants. And these elephants are kept in place by a very small rope tied to like a wooden stake. Now, the elephant could snap that rope without even making any effort, but it doesn't. Why? Because when it was a baby, it tried and couldn't break free. So eventually, it just stopped trying. Now that it's thousands of pounds, much, much heavier, it still continues to stand still. Not because the rope is holding it, but because its own mind is holding it back. And many leaders operate like that elephant. They're fully capable, fully equipped. They have the capacity, they have the skill, they have the talent, they have everything it takes. And yet they're standing still, not because of the fact that there are any actual constraints, but simply because of the ones that they accepted long ago and never questioned it again. Now, the truth, which is the good news, the truth does not just make you feel better, it actually helps you to lead differently. When you read, the Bible, John 8:32, it talks about for when we embrace God's truth, it releases true freedom into our lives. And I don't mean some, form of inspirational, I don't know, rush or not information, that pumps us up. But truth, which is God's truth, when we actively choose it, specifically choose to embrace it, and we hold on to it, even when maybe the lies might feel like, familiar. Well, the now woman does not stumble into it. She actively pursues it. And when she finds it, she builds her leadership on it. Now, there are some reality checks that we really need to examine today. And I'm just going to take us through five of these lies that, in my experience of working with many leaders, I've come to, note that these five keep resurfacing and resurfacing and resurfacing each single time. And the first one is usually, hey, I'm not enough. Well, I don't have the right background. I don't have the right education. Or I don't have, I don't even have the experience to lead at this level. Well, they're lies. They might sound like they're legit, but they are lies. The second one is, I'm too much, or, well, the truth is, they're lies because you're thinking you're too much because maybe you're a bit ambitious, or maybe you're a bit direct, or maybe you're very passionate, and that all these, you look at them as problems that needs to be managed. Of course, as a leader, when you're growing, and developing your character, you've got to be able to, manage your passion or manage how you, enter a room or hold yourself in a room. All those things are true. But God put that passion in us. And He didn't think it was too much to give you, that passion for what you're called to do. The third line is also something along the lines of, I can't handle this. Well, this is too big. It's a little bit too complex. And I'm not sure I can actually sustain it. Well, sorry to break the news, but they're lies. The fourth one, I don't matter enough. Like, I'm just one person, I'm just one voice. Maybe I have a very small vision, but actually, all it takes is having a vision. So when you think that, well, I only have, one vision and that I can't actually change anything significant, well, guess what? The light bulbs, it took one vision, aeroplanes flying, going to space. All of these is just one vision that has been growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. The fifth one or fifth lie, well, time has passed. My time has passed. I think it's too late. I'm not quite sure I can, complete everything. It's too late for me to build. Well, there is no such time. There's no better time than now. And every one of these lies has a specific, verifiable truth that directly displaces it. Now, a little bit about my own story here. I'm not sure where you're listening to me from, but back in those days in Ghana and still here in the UK, we do have GCSEs, O levels, and then A levels. And A level, I wanted to study law and economics and what have you. And my dad, changed the subject and all of those things. Um, Part of it was because he didn't think that was a good pathway for me. But the truth is, they were not necessarily true, right? And I'm not saying that be rebellious to your parents, but you're an adult, you're a leader, and so you should be able to know, you know, what has God called me to be, to build? What is the pathway that God has created for me? Because we know that we were all created for good works, even before we were predestined for good works. So, how are you going to replace it with what action, right? So, you got to give yourself some space. You've got to be able to be honest with yourself. And right now, if you've got pen and paper, then I want to encourage you and invite you to take a seat and write these down. Which of the 5 lies that I've shared really has landed hardest for you? And how long have you been carrying that lie for? The next question I want you to think about this week is, what has that lie cost you? Because when we are building our lives and leading and doing life from a place that is not true, it impacts our decisions big time. Decisions that we make and decisions that we choose not to make because of those lies. Or maybe steps that we were meant to take that we didn't take, or maybe invitations that we should have taken that we didn't take, or opportunities we missed. What has that lie cost you? And finally, what is the specific truth that directly contradicts it? And what would you change? What would you change? And what also would change if you led from that truth instead? So the challenge for us this week, really, just two homework. You've got two challenges this week. First is identify one lie from what I've shared today, in this episode that has had the greatest impact on your life, on your leadership, maybe even in your relationships, and write it down. Then write the truth that displaces it. And I don't mean write some vague affirmation or some vague, I am statement. Be very specific in terms of what is the actual truth about you. And the second challenge is find one piece of evidence from your own life that proves the lie is wrong. And it could be that, hey, like you're not good enough, but you realize that you're very capable. You have you have great capacity. You're a capable woman. You're very intelligent. You can think on your feet. Then immediately as you're looking, in your life, that proves the lie is wrong. So you can think of, maybe decisions you've made or specific moments, seasons in your life that displaces that lie. Write it down. And every time that lie might try to resurface again, you return right back to that evidence. So if you're looking to bring, the Nations of Women Leadership framework to your organization or maybe to your event, then I want to invite you to visit nationsofwomen.com, get in touch with us. And also, I want you to think for a moment who in your world, is leading from a place that, I don't think that's true. They're leading from a place of a lie. But maybe they don't know it. So I want you to send this episode to them today. And in our next episode, we're going to talk about the performance trap, why so many brilliant women lead from like the wrong foundation. What really changes when you stop performing and you actually start living, you actually start breathing. Finally, I want to close by reminding you that lie was just simply something that was handed to you. You did not go choosing that. But from today, even though it was handed to you and you accepted it from today, keeping that lie, keeping hold on to that lie is your choice. It is entirely your choice. It is a choice, and you have the opportunity to make a better one, because the truth is there is a better choice available. So know the truth that God says about you, build on it, lead from it, and watch what becomes possible, because this time the foundation is finally going to be solid for you. So if listening to this episode has, brought to the surface something that perhaps has been holding you back, then I want you to, reach out to us and let us know. And don't forget, someone in your world needs to hear this today. So until we meet again next week, remember to stay faithful, stay focused, stay bold, and above all, stay all in. And that's all for this week.